Matt.
Rianne.
Emma.
Sarah.
We'll be investigating the question, as a consumer, does demand for the ethical products have power on the decisions made in the supply chain?
To begin, consumers that may have a demand for ethical products may be human rights and animal rights activists, environmentalists, vegetarians and vegans who are interested in leather, fur and meat products, and people who practice their religion. Mallon suggests stakeholders have a role to play in the long-term future of businesses. Therefore, we can argue if companies do not notice the customers' demands for ethical products, the long-term future of businesses may be jeopardised. For instance, we can argue due to the increase in social media, it is now easier for consumers who are concerned about ethical products to find information on this matter. Recently, I read an article posted on Facebook about a man who had found a note in a pair of jeans he had purchased from Primark, written by a Chinese factory worker, who was begging for someone to recognise the distress they were in. This level of cruelty, Marx would argue, exploits the worker, and we could argue due to the accessibility consumers have to information regarding organisations' ethics, for instance through social media, failing to address stakeholders' concerns on this matter could result in protests. Freeman and Reed would argue without stakeholders' support, the company would cease to exist, suggesting consumers' demands for ethical products has power over decisions made in supply chains. It can be debated as well as the interest we can arguably establish in ethical products through anecdotes individuals share through social media, increased media coverage of disasters that have occurred in developing countries due to the poor attention Western companies have paid to the safety of their employees in garment factories, for instance the Rana Plaza incident in Bangladesh in 2013, consumers are becoming more aware and concerned about the ethical standards companies they purchase from actually practice. However, as a consumer, I have purchased products from companies that pay their employees very little, although I am aware of the distress the workers are subject to whilst making the products. Since the products are so cheap, I feel it would be foolish of me to purchase, for instance, a pair of jeans for £40 from Topshop when I can pay £12 at Primark. However, some may regard this as being selfish. In my opinion, as a student, there is no other option for me but to purchase from Primark in comparison to Topshop, since the price of the product is better and quality is equal. Cox would argue this is an example of how suppliers seek to create above normal returns by creating dependent buyers, and therefore due to the fact that few suppliers provide such cheap but still fashionable clothing, and due to the large amount of buyers of this type of product, Cox would argue suppliers have dominance. However, if I was to make the transition to only support companies whom I believe are behaving ethically, I cannot be sure the company are in fact behaving ethically. For instance, we can argue the information on ethics of companies is scarce or not presented clearly, since The Guardian discussed how Shell stopped supporting the wind energy and instead now advertises that it is funding research into other alternative energy sources. However, it is also reported that only 1% of the company's budget goes into this funding, which is very little. Environmentalists may find this concerning. Therefore, due to the way businesses advertise their ethics, we can argue companies deceive their consumers into thinking their behaviour is more ethical than it is. So we can argue information provided by companies does not always display their ethical nature in a way that is truthful. When I visited Washington DC last year, I visited a coffee shop called Pret a Manger. It stated on their napkins that food that is not purchased at the end of the day is given to homeless people in the local area. Also, when I visited the same coffee shop in Covent Garden, they stated that on their napkins, if the barrister gives you too many napkins, give them back. Hence, in this way, the franchisers express their concerns for others and the environment. Therefore, because of the ethical stance the franchise has taken with regards to homelessness and recycling, I now only visit Pret a Manger coffee shops because of the concerns they have about their ethics, because, in my view, they are doing the right thing. But others may argue their Washington DC branch may not even give their remaining food to homeless people and can just be saying this to appear ethical.
Why will consumers not change to ethical products?
I do not agree with the idea of sweatshops, a major concern in the unethical supply chain. I think they are immoral and brutal towards the workers, and it is discomforting to think this is happening to individuals around the world. Despite my feelings against this, in the past I have gone to Primark, a known organisation that purchases its clothing from sweatshops, of which one has recently collapsed and killed over 1,000 workers in Bangladesh. Each time I go to Primark, I spend considerable amounts of money. It is cheap, affordable and practical. My response to Primark's unethical supply chain, along with other retailers on the high street, was only temporary. I do not see the devastation and the detrimental effects sweatshops have on the workers. This is a major issue that is preventing ethical consumerism because when it is out of sight, it is out of mind. Hence, when I buy from retailers such as Primark, I do not think, I do not remember, and I do not act. It is shameful to say, but it is irrelevant. I am assuming that this is a similar case for many other shoppers because Primark's business success was undented by the disaster. Supporting this, it was found that consumers were more likely to support ethical organisations rather than to discipline or boycott unethical organisations, which could demonstrate why Primark's success was consistent throughout the disaster. Furthermore, as a student living off a student loan, I have to be cautious how I spend my money, the majority of which is spent on rent. This means I have to budget carefully for all my other living costs and needs. I feel as though I live comfortably but only because I choose to go without if I cannot afford something. Hence, this demonstrates that the way I live is centralised and focused around money. Therefore, in my situation, the cheapest solution is often my only choice, which means, despite my moral reservations, I continue to shop in stores like Primark. Hence, ethical consumerism is dependent on the consumer's financial condition. Moreover, if I had the choice, I would buy organic foods because they are overall a lot healthier for your body and well-being. However, I cannot afford to buy the more expensive organic foods and instead, I buy the supermarket basic foods, which are less healthy for you and they are of a lower quality. Hence, if I cannot afford to provide myself with my own optimum health and environment for my body, then in reality I cannot afford to provide others, that is, those working in sweatshops with a better quality of life. I cannot afford to consistently shop where quality is higher, items are more expensive, and products are ethical. Supporting this, it was found that consumers would still purchase goods from unethical organisations, but only at a lower price. Furthermore, in today's society, celebrities have a strong influence on how people express themselves. They are constantly changing their styles and trends to be like their icon. At the same time, retailers are also moulding their clothing and products around what the top celebrities are wearing or using. I personally go on eBay and search for Kim Kardashian clothing, and there are clothing manufacturers that sell cheap replicas of her clothes. Each piece will cost between £2 and £15, and the majority of products are distributed from China. When I buy these products, I know there is a high possibility they have come from a sweatshop. However, at the moment of purchasing these products, my needs are greater than the workers and my conscience disappears. Maybe it is this trace of selfishness that makes one incompetent to be ethical, and hence, the demand to be ethical is no longer existent, and substantially, decisions made in supply chains are not substantially influenced by consumers. Similarly, brands have a major impact on purchasing. I consider myself to do a lot of exercise. I go to the gym about 4 times a week and I cycle to university every day. And because of this, I like to purchase good quality gym clothing, which is mostly from Nike. However, Nike has experienced a lot of criticism since the late 20th century for their use of sweatshops, and there have recently been allegations of abuse towards the workers, such as kicking and hitting the employees and calling them by names of dog and pig. Although Nike has shown to respond and change how workers are treated in the sweatshops, many people are doubtful of how dedicated Nike are to resolving these issues. I knew Nike was involved in unethical conduct, however I did not know the facts and the severity of the situation because of the lack of knowledge I held. It was argued that competent decision-making in purchasing it is associated with consumers being fully informed. Despite this, from my experience with Primark and similar stores, I do not think my purchasing history of Nike would have changed if I did have sufficient information about the mistreatment of their workers. And from here on, when I do come to purchase new gym clothes, I am sure I would not hesitate to purchase from Nike. This supports my assumption that the attribute of selfishness is an important role and a strong influence in the actions that people take. Not only this, it is also what is convenient for myself and other consumers. Nowadays, everything is being made easier and simpler for consumers. For instance, instead of going to the supermarket and buying a food shop, you can order it online and get it delivered straight to your door with the click of a button, which I have done many times. This change in the purchasing process being developed by organisations is what, in my opinion, is making the public lazy. Not only in the purchasing process, but also in technology and the normal day-to-day tasks that we do. The public do not need simpler and easier ways to carry out things, but I want it and the public also want it. Hence, consumers are not going to go out of their way or out of their normal routine to enable themselves to purchase or practice ethical consumerism because of how the global market has standardised our society. Supporting this, it was stated that ethical consumerism will only be practiced if it is advantageous towards the consumer, such as lower price, higher quality, or having the inconvenience to shop around. Therefore, this means that the demand for ethical products is not substantial enough to have an impact on the decisions made in supply chains, and hence unethical organisations do not have the pressure to change.
When and why do suppliers want to dominate the supply chain? It has been said that an organisation's ability to exercise power over another actor will depend on the actor's dependence on the organisation. So if a company has a product that the consumer has high dependence on, the consumer will have less power over the decisions made within the supply chain. You don't need to pay the prices of being ethical. So if you want to become an ethical consumer, it's important that you don't allow yourself to become dependent on single organisations. Looking at the power matrix, we can see that the supplier has dominance if supplier power relative to the buyer is high and buyer power relative to the supplier is low. Supplier dominance can occur when there's a small amount of suppliers but there are many buyers. Many of us, including myself, have travelled by aeroplane. This is a market that demonstrates the lack of suppliers, which means that the aeroplane manufacturers do not necessarily need to be ethical, as they can sell their products anyway. For example, in 2009, Airbus were involved in a scandal that saw European governments subsidise Airbus illegally to steal market share from Boeing. When booking flights in the past, I have not considered the unethical practices of plane manufacturers in my booking, and if I did, I would be left with very few alternative flights. Therefore, it's very difficult to be an ethical consumer if an unethical company has a large share in the market. Another way that suppliers can ensure they have dominance is by ensuring that they have high switching costs. For example, I purchased an Apple iPad a few years back. Then when it came to upgrading to a new tablet, I felt trapped into buying another iPad because of the compatibility problems. If I bought a different branded tablet, I wouldn't be able to have the same apps and music on it as I currently had, so for me to switch brands, the cost would be quite high. Because of the supplier dominance, it is easier for Apple to act unethically. In 2014, it was reported that Apple were failing to protect Chinese workers, leading to the deaths of 14 workers who supposedly committed suicide. However, this didn't prevent myself or many others to continue to purchase Apple products, as at the time of my purchase, the needs of the workers were not my priority. Another factor that gives a supplier dominance is if the product is not customised. As customisation is very costly, many people, including myself, cannot afford to buy such bespoke products and have to purchase from large suppliers who may be unethical. Here many of us are left with little choice regarding manufacturer. For example, clothing from Primark is very affordable, especially for the quality. If I decided to purchase clothing that was specifically made for myself, the cost would be very high. So, in this instance, myself, like many other people, would choose to purchase clothing from Primark. For many companies, it costs more money to be ethical. Take chicken farms, for example. If you breed free-range chickens, you'll need more room per chicken, which will cost more money. On the other hand, you can contain the chickens in a smaller area so that you have more chickens, allowing you to produce more eggs. I would prefer to purchase free-range chicken eggs. However, due to the higher purchase price of the free-range chicken eggs, I choose to purchase eggs from caged hens. Whilst I may feel guilty at the time, it's easier as a consumer to forget that you have made an unethical decision. As the number of people who act like I do is high, the supplier is not dependent on those who choose the free-range eggs for ethical reasons, and so the supplier has dominance over the consumer. So it appears very easy for suppliers to choose to be unethical due to the fact that as consumers, many of us prefer the lower cost and familiarity that unethical companies give us.
How demand for ethical products has changed businesses. So if we look at the example of McDonald's now has a wide range of healthy options. All its eggs are organic, all its milk is organic, all its meat is local. So for example, if you buy, say, a Big Mac in the UK, that beef will be British beef, and if you buy a Big Mac in Spain, that beef will be Spanish beef, rather than beforehand the beef would have come from all sorts of places. And I think people were saying how the meat in a Big Mac would have come from about 17 different countries. So now all their meat's local. The wide range of healthy options that I've noticed when I've been in McDonald's restaurants is that they've now got salads, they've now got fruit, they've now got juice, they've now got wraps. They also offer books instead of toys when you purchase a Happy Meal. There's also lots of nutritional labelling as well. So if you buy a Big Mac, it will say the amount of calories, the amount of carbohydrates, and the percentage of what that is of your daily recommended amount. They also serve Rainforest Grow coffee in UK restaurants, and they've now switched from having margarine in their products to real butter, as this is seen as much healthier. They also now use kale instead of iceberg lettuce, as this is seen as having much more nutritional value. Burger King and Wendy's have also removed their soft drinks from the kids menu, and McDonald's have just followed as well. I've noticed that instead of now having soft drinks with Happy Meals, which is 70% of McDonald's sales, they've also got their milk, which is organic, as I've said before. They've got juice and other things which is seen as much more healthy. When I was reading newspapers, I noticed McDonald's had a lot of bad press. A lot of this was from the film Super Size Me, and where many other things came out about the amount of sugar, that there was only 7 products that didn't have sugar on the McDonald's menu, and now the Big Mac was seen as a dessert due to the fact that it had so much sugar. McDonald's now sponsors lots of worthwhile causes and events, so it's trying to promote a healthy lifestyle. It sponsors the Olympics as well as the Football World Cup and lots of other events. There's also lots of Ronald McDonald charities that help kids view McDonald's as part of an active and healthy lifestyle. This is due to the fact that 40% of children asked to go to McDonald's once a week. So obviously McDonald's plays a big part in that, and whenever I've watched children's programs such as Disney and Cartoon Network, I've noticed McDonald's features heavily on them. So do certain companies own too much? McDonald's employ 1.7 million people, so they've got a 19% market share compared with Burger King's 2% market share. The only people that employ more than them in the world, the only organisations that employ more people than McDonald's, are the Chinese military and the US Department of Defence. There was also a call to boycott Nestle, so I remember reading that Nestle was doing unethical things, saying their baby milk was better than breast milk. However, Nestle own over 2,000 brands, so you literally have to go around a supermarket and with a list pointing out what is Nestle and what isn't. And many things that people consume, they simply don't know that it's even Nestle, and they actually have to look at every single thing they buy to see whether it was made Nestle, which obviously would be virtually untenable. So from our experience, it seems that the societal impact can influence corporations. So people do have the power to influence corporations, and if everyone pulls together, then people can change things, and we can change what happens with corporations. However, this very rarely occurs, and it's usually just small pockets of people that try and influence policy, and obviously you need a big group of people to influence companies like McDonald's, and some people would argue that companies like Nestle just can't be influenced by people because they're just simply too big.
In our experience, customers receive little knowledge. The knowledge is kept mainly to organisations who make the products or provide the services. We can assume that they tell the truth, but they may not, such as McDonald's putting more salt in their salad than on their chicken nuggets.
McDonald's didn't advertise this, and hence consumers were oblivious. However, the Daily Mail publicised this information, creating public access to this unethical practice through different streams of media coverage.
Cox's framework is relevant since it explains how unethical supply chains are still trading because buyers do not have overall dominance.
For instance, Primark clothing is purchased by many because clothing is cheap and still fashionable, therefore creating dependent buyers, since not many organisations offer this, which can relate to Cox's framework, since buyers are dependent on the suppliers.